welcome. You're watching Bloomberg Quint. To borrow from Shakespeare, there's something rotten in the state of audits in India. This year itself, we've seen a spate of auditor resignations, RBI cracking down on auditors, and questions being raised about audit quality. I must add, it's not just India. Auditors are facing scrutiny world over. What's gone wrong? Joining me to discuss that are some of India's top auditors, P.R. Ramesh of Deloitte, Jameel Khatri of KPMG, and Sudhir Soni of EY. And for an independent counter, we have Naushir Mirza, once an auditor and now an independent director and the head of audit committees at several boards on several blue chip companies. So, gentlemen, thank you very much to all four of you. I'd like to start with the issue that we've really grappled with this year, which is the issue of auditor resignations. Last year, we had a handful of companies which saw auditor resignations. This year, it's about 7 or 8 times that number. There have been in several companies auditors resigning just before the financial year ended, which is alarming at one level or the other. In others, maybe the resignations happened after. In both cases, we've had very little information come in from auditors as to exactly why they're resigning, And in some cases, for instance, one company I know, the auditor that resigned had been the auditor of that company right since that company went IPO. And then it resigned, and again, without adequate explanation. So the kind of explanations we've got, for instance, in one case, the auditor said inadequate information. In another case, they said significant information was missing. In a third case, an auditor said due to time constraints caused by other commitments and engagements. Now, let me tell you, in this third case, the audit firm resigned in the second year of a 5-year term. Due to time constraints is really, really surprising. And so the question I want to ask all of you is, what exactly is going on here? And Sudhir, I'll start with you. Is it the fear of liability? Is it that you all took on too many clients when rotation was happening, and now you realize that these are not necessarily the quality of clients you want to be dealing with? Is it something that I haven't anticipated?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of various factors. One, of course, is the fact that the regulatory oversight has increased, but that's not been only over the last year. I think since the Companies Act 2013 came into play, the regulations have increasingly been tighter on auditors. More recently was, of course, the announcement of the NFRA being formed and the judgment in the case of Satyam from the SAT. I think these were a few things probably which are more recent developments which have taken place. The other important, I think, milestone was the fact that this was the first year of audit rotation having kicked in, and auditors were for the first time looking at some of the accounts. So I feel that for some of these companies, probably it was poor transition planning where you didn't know what were some of the things that you were getting into. And I feel both auditors and companies are equally responsible to have ensured that there was a smooth transition. And audit committees should have played an important role in ensuring that if there were information gaps, these should not have surfaced late into the years. They should have been identified during the course of the year and seen that the auditors are satisfied.
But what does it say about auditors, Jameel, if heightened liability has made you question some of the clients that you're working with? Were you not questioning these clients on day one when you were taking them on?
First of all, I echo a lot of what Sudhir said, because I think consciousness on responsibilities within the auditors is going up because of a bunch of developments that are happening. I think the second point, which I'd like to kind of take a slightly different lens here, I think it's good that instead of playing along with management, auditors are at least now saying we will take action. If we're not comfortable with the company, we will move out of the company. And to your point, I mean, in the past, one could have argued there was a similar set of circumstances where an auditor continued. And I think the fact that the auditors are willing to stand up and say we no longer want to be associated with a company, even after trying our best with audit committees and everybody, I think one is a step in the right direction from a governance perspective. Where I think, to the point that you made in your introduction, where we need to focus on is the reasons for the resignation. Because I think investors' interest will be well served if the reasons are well articulated so that the investors know what is going on out there. But on balance, I think this is an evolution. I think the fact that auditors resigning is reflecting that people are becoming more conscious about their responsibility. And the only other point I'll make is in the past, when an auditor resigned, it did not make news. The fact that an auditor resigning is making news, I think, is a step in the right direction, because it means that the value of the audit has gone up and the comfort it provides, the discomfort a lack of audit provides has gone up. That's my perspective.
Mr. Ramesh, what if an auditor has been with a firm or a company from the time that it went public, 4 or 5 years now, and suddenly resigns and then says, I've not received significant information or information that could impact the audit, and hence I'm resigning. And this happens before the financial year ends. What am I to make of what that auditor has been up to for 4 or 5 years?
You see, I mean, it's unfortunate that the auditor is always blamed for such situations.
I'm not blaming. I'm asking you, what am I?
You say, what am I to make of?
So, let me represent the shareholder community, because I'm the stakeholder, broader stakeholder community.
First is, what is incorrect is an expectation that what's happened in the past will always happen even now and will happen in future. It's situational. If you don't receive information today, you may have received information in the past. It doesn't mean you are wrong today and you were right in the past, or you are wrong in the past too.
Okay, let me refine my example. Okay.
When an auditor does not receive information, the auditing standards require him to withdraw from the engagement. So if he's complying with the standard, then the investor stands up and says, why should an auditor
No, not at all. No? Okay, I'll tell you why I use that illustration. We did see in one particular instance that an auditor who had been signed on late last year and had done the limited review of 2 quarters, then came to the financial accounts for the year, discovered in January, February that vital information was missing, and then decided to resign. Okay, maybe I will not blame that auditor as much, because that auditor has just come into this company, doesn't have a relationship, to a large extent, has found out that that information is not forthcoming, and has decided to resign. Though I find it very alarming that they would resign before the financial year ends. That's one point. But in the contrasting case that I'm referring to, when an auditor resigns before a year end, but has been the auditor for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, has helped take that company public as an auditor, there is a relationship with management.
Yeah,
so I'm just curious to know.
But how does that matter? If the auditor has not received information, he has not received information.
Okay, so now tell me.
Within the time required for him to sign off.
Okay, so if it's
That's why I said it's that situation, that context. You can't say because there are NPAs today, there should have been NPAs in the past too of the same volume.
Not suggesting that at all.
No, it's the present position.
Okay, now having given you 2 examples that are contrasting, I want to know what is the reasonable expectation of a shareholder when it comes to an explanation provided by an auditor as to why he has left this company before the financial year has come to an end, or why he's in a 5-year term and has quit suddenly in the 2nd year of his term itself.
There is a process in law where the auditor has to give the explanation to the regulator, which is available in the public domain.
Correct.
Now, what happens is the investor community is so large and diverse that somebody or the other believes that the explanation is not adequate. No, who's to be the
actually,
judge?
sir, can I contest that? And I say this very politely. In almost every explanation that I have read so far, there has been no mention of the materiality of the impact of that missing information or inadequate information. There are phrases like inadequate information regarding XYZ aspect of business. There are phrases like significant information is missing. As a shareholder, I am none the wiser whether it is a 10 crore matter, a 50 crore matter, a 250 crore matter.
But you've been told it's significant, right?
Yeah, so significant means what?
So therefore, are you saying the auditor should provide to the investors a laundry list of items which he has not received?
I'm saying an auditor should provide definitely a more detailed explanation.
May I make a point here? I think first of all, as I said, I agree with the fact that in everybody's interest that the auditor puts out the real reasons on why they're resigning. Second, if we believe there's an improvement required in that area, let's write regulation, let's provide clarity, because today, because...
Jamil, I'm so sorry, but the company law says very clearly you must state the reasons.
No, so
well, what is it? Are they supposed to say you must state the reasons in entirety and fullness?
When an auditor resigns, he's obliged to write a statement to the... Because see, there is a contract between the shareholders and the auditor. There's not a contract between the auditor and the regulator.
This is a point I want to make, yes.
Regulator, that's well and good. Let the regulator poke his nose in it. What about the shareholder? And I think I agree with Menika that whatever I have read of these, they are such cryptic, vague things.
You're saying that the company or the management is not responsible at all for making public why the auditor is...
Yes, but in the instance when the company is not giving its auditor information and therefore by extension also depriving its shareholders information, what hope can I have of the company? Therefore my hope lies with the auditor, who is the gatekeeper.
Has 3 pages of information saying list not received. You are required to publish the 3 pages?
Is it your case then? Is it your case then that all the explanations that have been provided so far are enough?
I am saying first the explanations are valid first. Are they in, if it's to the point which Jamil made, is the reason for the resignation consistent with why the purpose for which, I mean, for the reason why he resigned?
Difficult
How
for
do
us
we
to
know?
answer. We don't know.
How
the
do we
reasons.
know? When you say I have inadequate information,
Yeah, in another one,
In
it
an
says
auditor's, let's say an auditor's
tax
report, what does he
inquiries
say?
or something
We have
like in-
received all
yeah.
information, explanations, which to the best of our knowledge and belief were adequate for the purpose of our audit, not
Correct.
whether the investors believe it is adequate for the.
Correct.
So in that context, he is responding to say, I have not received what is not
Yeah, but
for the.
what has
in
he
his
not
public
received?
report, if he is not telling you what is materiality, what it is, why are you then saying he should?
wow. So do you agree? No, one second, Jamil. I want you and Sudhir to tell me whether you agree with Mr. Ramesh that the information being provided when auditors resign is adequate, that shareholders should be happy with this information. They should not demand more
Yeah,
information.
I mean, I think we, in a way, what I'm saying is a solution here. And that solution is that if we are unhappy, and the point is it's very, very flippant type of reasons that have been given. I agree with that. But that is because the rules on saying what you need to state itself are unclear, they're evolving. So my suggestion would be, and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs and the Institute is doing it, is going back to the auditors and asking them for what exactly
The
are the
Institute, I'm
circumstances.
so sorry to say,
No.
with all due respect, is hopeless. We have not received any response from the Institute.
Yeah.
They keep saying we're looking into these resignations. Half the year has passed and nothing has moved.
So, Menka, the only point I want to kind of leave behind is to say, if we believe that's an area where governance can improve by better disclosure, I'm all for it.
I think resigning a public company is a very high hurdle. You know, a listed company resignation, I think, is a high hurdle. And the fact that the auditor is resigning actually is part of the decision matrix that the auditing standard puts you through. It says if you haven't received information which is material and pervasive, then you should try to get that. You make all efforts to get it from the
My
company, the
question,
auditor.
sir, is very simple. Are auditors providing adequate information to stakeholders when they resign from a company, especially in such exigent circumstances, of why they are resigning? Enough to give the shareholder or the stakeholder comfort or understanding of the situation?
Yeah, I believe they should.
No,
and-
are they at this point?
So I
in
wouldn't
time?
comment because that would be specific to, I think, the instances that have
Broadly
happened.
speaking, Mr. Ramesh is saying what you're getting is good enough. I'm asking you if you agree.
Yeah, no, I don't think if you look at all the cases, that in all cases you would have received adequate explanation. I think there are some
One
cases.
auditor quit from a company, like I said, second year of a 5-year term, saying we're quitting due to time constraints caused by other commitments and engagements. Now, either this means that audit firm has taken on too many clients and can't service them properly, in which case I'm thinking, what were you thinking? Or they don't want to have to deal with this client anymore. They're finding polite words to get out of it, in which case I'm thinking, what am I supposed to be thinking? Because you're exiting the company, but I'm still stuck here as a shareholder.
Just one
So
point,
what do I make of all of this?
Just one point, Menka, on your comment on the institute. I think the time between these incidents and the follow-up of both the regulators, that is the institute and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, I think
Feb
that's,
is when they started. Feb, March, April,
Yeah.
May, June,
Yeah.
July, August, and we're now in September.
yeah. So I think
7 months.
Yeah, from what I believe, there is.
Do
a
you
process,
have a report from the institute?
Yeah, so there's a process which
Is
I think
there a report that the institute has put out looking into any of these, even 10 of these resignations?
Yeah, what I'm aware is they are looking into it, but you may not have. We don't have probably any report yet out.
From everything you heard, are auditors resigning because they're more interested in protecting their backs as opposed to providing shareholders information?
This is not an or in this. Obviously, they resign to protect their backs because they think this is not an audit they would like to sign off on. And the second one is that having protected their backs, they still have an obligation to tell the people with whom they have a contract. The shareholders appoint them to do an audit. You tell the shareholders, okay, I'm abandoning this without a reason. You know, it's not the kind of contract where you call a carpenter to repair your chair and he goes away halfway after lunch and doesn't finish repairing. That's okay. Here you have an obligation. The shareholders have been hurt in several of these companies with the prices collapsing. So that is a serious matter, and the prices collapse perhaps more than they need to because of the point you made in the beginning. No one knows how material this is. So then the reaction is we just half the price when if perhaps they had more information, the prices wouldn't have behaved in the very conservative
So
manner
whose
that they
interest
did.
do auditors have in mind at the end of all of this? Are they allowing their own private interests to surpass the need of sharing information with shareholders.
This is a normal human behavior. They try to do as much of their job as they can.
I think we should look at the nuance on this thing. The way this works in practice, Menka, no auditor wakes up one day and says, I'm going to resign. There's a process. They go to management. They go to management. They challenge management. They go to the audit committee. And depending on what they get. Now, please realize an audit cannot be completed without cooperation from the company. Just like we are saying about resignation, my point is you cannot complete an audit and you cannot say anything in your report.
So I have only 2 points to make. If the desire to resign is strengthened today because of what has happened in the case of Satyam and Price Waterhouse, or the fact that now in a large number of insolvency and bankruptcy cases we're seeing forensic audits being conducted. I'm told that auditors are now worried that gosh, they're going to show up poorly in some forensic audit later on, and hence therefore they're being even more careful. The liabilities that have been enhanced under the Companies Act, it could be the combined impact of all of this. Are you putting your own interests above the interests of shareholders is my only simple question. Because you're not giving me enough information.
No, but Menka, and again, therefore we should focus on how does the investor get better information. But let me tell you one thing. As far as the auditor is concerned, there are, for all these instances that you cited where auditors have resigned, let me tell you, in my experience, there are an equal number of instances where the auditor challenged the management that if you don't do the right thing, I will resign, and management did the right thing. The fact that investors and
But why should I applaud you for that? This is exactly what should have been happening all these years, sir.
And I think, Manika, it's been just mentioned, but nobody's gone into it further. I think it's a gross failure also of the audit committees of these various entities.
Of course, 100%.
And what were they doing? It's their job to protect the auditor and to make sure he's able to do his work.
Please don't for a minute think that we've let the companies off the hook.
Yeah, but since you've got the management auditors here...
the discussion is about audits. That's why. The managements of the companies are even more responsible. Actually, they're the ones who took money from the public. And they're the ones, therefore, are more answerable. But today is not about them. Today is about auditors.
Right.
Second issue I wanted to raise. In this case, I am going to name a company, and I'm going to name a company simply just to be able to illustrate my point. Okay, we had the recent case of a major aviation company, Jet Airways, which we saw on the day of the earnings having to be announced, which the company had informed the stock exchange. The company late evening sent out a notification saying that the earnings have been pushed or are being delayed because the audit committee of the company has refused to recommend the said financial results to the board for its approval pending closure of certain matters. These are the words in the notification, right? Subsequently, of course, Jet then revised its information, if I may put it that way, because the Bombay Stock Exchange asked it that, hey, to us, you've said this. Outside to, through a press release, you have said that the management sought extra time, therefore you've pushed the earnings, which one is true. And they said, oh, but the management sought extra time. Now, to begin with, that's difficult to swallow because you don't put a notification of this grave a nature out and say that my audit committee refused to recommend the earnings and then suddenly say, oh, but sorry, I used the wrong words. Actually, we asked for more time. That's one. By itself, it's fairly alarming because we don't see this happen very often. Now, one might say that it's brave on part of the audit committee to stand up, but that earnings are getting delayed by 2 weeks because of that is quite substantial. But my bigger problem was when the earnings finally came out, we spent several hours that evening trying to figure out what could the problem have been that the audit committee actually decided not to approve the numbers on that particular day. Does it show up anywhere? Has the audit committee provided any information? Has the company provided any information? Has the auditor provided information? We drew a blank across the board. So I'm going to ask you, sir, before I get to the auditors on this, okay? When faced with an instance like this, not this particular company necessarily, but when faced with an instance like this, what are shareholders supposed to do?
They can't do anything because all they can do is to wait for an outcome. What can a shareholder do? But you can well ask, what should the management and the board be doing? And I think across the world again, boards still don't know how to deal with bad news. They try to downplay, they try to brush it under the carpet. So I don't know, I have no idea of Jet Airways, but I can only assume that they were hoping and keeping their fingers crossed that till the last day, they will have enough information to satisfy the auditor, and it's on the very last
Audit committee. This is not even, it hadn't even gone, I mean, it wasn't the auditor disapproving, the audit committee.
Well, the audit
So
committee
you tell
doesn't
me,
do any original work.
you serve on audit committees.
Yes.
Under what circumstances would you, on the day the earnings are supposed to be announced and the board meeting is happening, would you refuse to sign a set of results?
I would, Manika, if they shouldn't be signed. But what I would have done is to have better channels of communication with the auditors, to be forewarned that such a situation is developing, and perhaps to talk then to management and say, maybe we need to announce a postponement much sooner, because it looks like this is a major issue, and it doesn't seem to me like in the next 7 days it's going to get resolved. But most managements and committees too would say, why cause alarm? Hopefully we will untie this knot.
How significant would it have to be for you as a member of an audit committee to refuse to sign or recommend the results, whatever the technical language is, on the day the earnings are supposed to be announced?
Yeah, if the
How significant would it have to be? How big would it have to be for you to say
no? It would
no?
have to be reasonably big. Now I can't say a number or...
No, I'm not asking for a number. It would have to be a large issue.
Big enough for the auditor to refuse to sign. If the auditor says, I'm not signing...
Okay, I don't know if the auditor refused to sign or not, because that information was not available.
Well, apparently the auditor didn't have the information. He didn't refuse to sign. He said, I can't make up a...
I don't know. I don't know. I know what Jet said publicly. I'm using that just to draw this illustration, saying it must be grave if an audit committee has refused to recommend the results. I'm using the word grave because I can't put a number to it. If it's grave, there has to be some explanation forthcoming later on as to what or how it got resolved, or is that also only supposed to be within closed doors?
It's not a legal requirement.
So the day after they postponed the numbers, earnings announcement, the stock fell. Okay, who was hurt the most? Shareholders, correct?
Of course.
Now, is it not incumbent on someone in this set of players to inform shareholders what the issue was and how it got resolved? Because the issue was enough to cause actual real material monetary damage.
I would agree. Today, good governance, you should communicate. Good governance, you should. I can't argue with you on that point. But as I said earlier, most people still are learning that particular game.
Okay.
Such situations do happen. It's not that they haven't happened before. It's not that in all cases, accounts and the auditors, everybody is ready 1 week before. There are many times where grave matters, particularly involving judgment, a lot of work happens towards the very end, even to the last. You're seeking information, evaluating, a whole host of things. And at that point in time, if you find you're not ready, meaning the auditor is not concluded, or even the management has not fully been able to provide sufficient, appropriate evidence to convince an auditor or even the audit committee, I don't think there's anything wrong for the audit committee to say, we don't recommend these results, let's take some more time. I mean, if there is some more time, and that could have happened. And thereafter, I don't think it is required for everybody to say, yeah, this is why we did, this is the number, please look at it, now this number is all right, we had some doubts on this number.
So who is to be held responsible for the stock fall the next day?
Are we expecting the investors to micromanage what's
No, not at all, sir. I'm not suggesting investors know better than management or audit committees or auditors, but I want to know who is to be held responsible for the fall in the stock price the next day,
that's the point I'm coming
which is
to.
entirely linked to this particular one event.
Who's responsible? Nobody would want to fall in the stock price, neither the management nor the audit committee nor the auditors. Nobody, everybody understands the consequences. But what is worse is to say, merely because the stock price may fall, let's go ahead and approve this in whatever it is.
Not suggesting that at all. Please don't take me wrongly.
So
I'm not saying
falling of the share price is a consequence one has to live with.
I'm only asking for more information. In this entire process, all I'm saying is at the end of all of this, I was left, a shareholder was left none the wiser as to what could have potentially gone wrong.
True.
So my question is more information, incumbent to be shared by the people involved, whether that's the company, the audit committee and the auditors, or are you saying that no, I should live with whatever limited, vague wording that a company shares with the stock exchange?
The fact that the accounts have been deferred in a particular case, could be any case for that matter. Yeah, sure, investors are concerned why these results were to have been announced, but have not been announced. But then if they have been announced subsequently, it's a question of how much you want to react into it.
There's another technical question I have, sorry. When something like this happens, when an audit committee refuses to sign results, does that mean that the auditor has also refused to sign the results? Would that be
You won't even
linked
come
in
into
some
the
way?
picture till the audit committee
So
approves.
the sequence of events, Menka, is the first the management proposes, the
Right.
audit committee then accepts and then
And then,
recommends, and then the auditor
auditor,
comes in.
right?
So I
Which
think
means
this-
so it doesn't mean that if the audit committee has refused to recommend, that means the
The
auditor has
auditor
also
is
refused.
present at the audit committee. There is a dialogue which happens.
That's
So it
the
is not
legal
that-
sequence.
Sure.
The
Yes.
reality is the auditor has been doing the audit for a month, 2 months. He's finished his work, and he talks to the audit committee and says, I think these accounts are worth approving, because the audit committee is not an auditor itself. So it depends almost entirely on the auditor's work to form its own opinion.
Okay.
And the auditor will point out certain issues which he's not entirely comfortable with, but which is not necessarily an issue.
So when an audit committee refuses to recommend results, does that mean that the audit
auditor
committee is
has
unhappy
not
with the
been-
auditor's
No, no.
work, or
No, the auditor
both are
has
unhappy
not-
with the management's work?
No, none of those. Take Jet Airways.
I'm
I
trying to
don't know.
understand
I
what to
don't
make
have
of
the-
this.
Let me use the Jet Airways situation. You know, they reported an enormous loss.
Of course, yes.
They did. Now, it's possible, I don't know, I was not there. It's possible that the auditor was asking, is this company a going concern or not? You had such a terrible loss. Show me how, over the next 1 year, whatever, you're going to turn this company around, because it's not going to survive if you're going to keep hitting the accounts with a loss like this. And this may be an issue where there was a certain amount of work the management needed to do to look at how they will fund this loss, how they will turn the company around. And this was left till the last moment. It went back and forth. The auditor said, no, this is not a convincing explanation. I don't know, this may be completely untrue. I'm just making a guess. Because, you know,
I
Ramesh
understand.
said it's the judgment issues that are often the cause of delay.
Sure.
And result in, or not the cause of delay, which are taken finally at the last moment.
Okay.
And judgment is, everyone's judgment is different.
We'll give you know, situations
benefit
like
of
the
the
jet
doubt.
situation a long rope. I'll bring
yeah.
one more issue into this issue of you know, audit quality.
Yeah.
Clearly, even the RBI doesn't seem to be very happy, because we have seen you know, more recent circular in which the Reserve Bank of India, based on the large amount of divergences that were witnessed in several banks, you know, over the last FY16 and FY17, has tightened rules and put in place a graded enforcement plan framework. I'm not trying to technically discuss this enforcement plan, but the perception clearly is also that the RBI is also not very happy with the quality of audits that are going on at banks, as a result of which we saw divergences ranging from 6,000 crores at Yes Bank to 20,000 crores and more at State Bank of India.
We are all reacting based on perhaps limited information. It's highly likely, and you rightly said this is judgmental. Now, a regulator has visibility across banks. Now, an auditor, when he's looking at a particular account as to whether provision is adequate or not, he has only information relating to the performance in that bank.
Of course, I
that
understand
account.
that. Why then did
Now,
RBI
the
tighten rules?
RBI's
Why did RBI
inspection,
tighten rules
because
then?
RBI has got information across banks and says A, B, C, D banks, this entity
That
would have
explains the
reported.
divergence issue.
Correct.
Okay. Why did RBI tighten rules just a few months ago? Why did RBI put in a
Because
graded enforcement, you know,
will
sort of
need
framework
to-
for
correct.
auditors?
You will need early warning signals. You need to be able to convert subjective judgment as much as possible to objective criteria.
All this has existed in the world of
No, but
audit
that
all these
keeps
years,
getting
sir.
refined each time which happens.
Why
Supposing
have they
you
put in an enhanced enforcement action framework in which they have enhanced the penalty framework for auditors? Why?
Yeah, I think it's. I think
Is it not because of loss of maybe a little bit of faith?
Again, I don't think that is necessarily a correct assessment, because even the RBI on its own provisioning norms has evolved over time. Let me just give a perspective again here. In a lot of these cases, there was consultation with the RBI at different points in time on what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. Auditors had to take a judgment based on what the circulars were, and as we've all said before, based on that, certain judgments were exercised.
Right.
Now, RBI is trying to send a message two-part, both to management once again,
Of
to
course.
say, folks, you know, if we find too many instances of these divergences, we will hold management accountable for not enforcing the circulars.
Right.
And with management, you know, they have a lot of leeway on many things on what they can do with management. Similarly, they're telling the auditors there's a heightened sense of importance on this issue, and therefore we would like you to be on guard that if you do not kind of hold management accountable, you know, we will kind of do this. So it's an evolution of the entire regulatory framework. Personally, I think, again, it's a step in the right direction, because I've always believed that audit quality will improve only if the regulators...
But it's not a rap on the knuckles.
I don't see it that way.
You know, so far it would seem that we're talking about some sort of, you know, deep decline going on in India. That's not the case at all. I didn't mean to alarm people in any fashion. I'm putting you on the spot because, you know, I've been wanting to do this for many months now.
Oh, my job is safe.
Ever since the first resignation happened. So this is like 6 months of pent-up questions. 6 months of pent-up questions.
Join the club.
But, you know, I think, Mr. Mirza, the question I want to put to this is not just an India perception, it is an international perception. And I'll quote some bits on audit quality to you here, okay? The International Forum of Independent Audit Regulators scrutinized about 900 audits and found that 40% of them, okay, were not good enough. Accounting lapses at 40% of them. The Financial Reporting Council's latest review, okay, speaks very poorly of the Big Four. I don't want to get into individual names because everybody will get defensive here, but it speaks very, very poorly of this. And I'll tell you what the reasons they've cited are, and I've written them down here. I think one of them had to do with the most common issue identified by these regulators was a failure among auditors to assess the reasonableness of assumptions. That's one. The second biggest problem was a failure among auditors to sufficiently test the accuracy and completeness of data or reports produced by management. It seems to me that these are the same issues we've been facing for several years on several accounts, whether it's Enron or Satyam. So
none of those. No, those were not judgmental issues.
Yeah.
Here we are talking
Test the accuracy and completeness of data or reports produced by the management.
Those were frauds.
So have the problems evolved because of the complexity of what's going on in the world around us?
Yes, complexity is certainly a very important ingredient of some of the difficulties we are today facing, and the challenges that many auditors have in getting their heads around the complex kind of transactions that companies are now doing. So that is certainly one risk. If you just look at those two, I think on the accuracy and completeness of data, which is one of the things identified in that report you were reading from, I think that is certainly an audit failure. If an auditor has not adequately verified the accuracy and completeness, there is certainly a failing of the auditor. But the first one,
assess the reasonableness of assumptions. That's a judgment issue.
Now that is judgmental, and to be fair, again, to the auditors, when you look at a large number of complex businesses, you may not be as familiar with that particular business to be able to test those assumptions, and you rely therefore to a great degree both on management and to some degree even on the audit committee. And that's a failure even of the audit committees to actually find out what are the assumptions that have been used and to apply their own minds and judgment to whether those assumptions are reasonable or they are not.
These were the two findings of the International Forum of Independent Audit Regulators. The FRC found that the fall in quality across the Big Four is due to a number of factors, including a failure to challenge management and show appropriate skepticism across their audits, poorer results for audits of banks. This is the regulator in the UK saying this, right? It sounds very similar to everything we've been discussing for the last 15 minutes or 20 minutes or so.
Let me explain where the issue is. Take UK, for instance. And you talked of skepticism and auditors challenging the management. You see, in the past, a lot had to do with accounting and auditing, a lot to do with hindsight. Then, to a great extent, it moved from hindsight to insight. Now the issues which are coming up all relate to foresight. And when regulatory inspection, if I do 2 years later, I can't use hindsight to judge foresight at the point in time. Now take, for example, UK. If I were doing a UK company, Brexit has happened. You and I could have completely different views on the implications of Brexit for that company.
Fair enough.
So what is the level of skepticism? You as management are confident, you're running the business, you know the industry.
Okay, so sir, can I ask you, let's not use the Brexit example, it's very extreme. But give me a more real example that illustrates exactly the difficulty that you've pointed out.
Take companies which today India may be facing, the impact of petroleum prices. Now, how far into the future? Do we believe the rupee will be 75?
But I don't think that's what they're asking you to do when they say failure to challenge management and show appropriate skepticism across audits. It's not that, you are not able to guesstimate crude prices 2 years down the line.
Sure. Because what happens, whether it's shipping industry, I could take a much larger long-term view of 10 years in others. Now, what happens is, Management may say, based on what we have done, this is what we believe is the dollar rupee in the next few years, and therefore this will be the revenues, therefore our carrying value of the assets, this is the level of impairment.
So are you saying that audit has moved to more judgment-oriented work,
issues
and
which are coming
therefore
up could be that. What is important is, if an auditor has failed to do certain audit procedures which are fundamental, or he has missed a crater in the balance sheet as opposed to a hole in the balance sheet, that's a different matter altogether. But there are a lot of judgment matters, just like your NPA is a judgment
I have to ask both of you this question. You know, guesstimating crude prices or commodity prices or what's going to happen in the future has never been a specialty of any human being in the past. So what is new about this problem?
I'll give you my lens on this. I think one is we cannot shy away that the expectation going forward is that auditors will challenge companies a lot more than they have done in the past. So that's the first thing. From our perspective, we see this as a message that we need to challenge globally, and we've acknowledged that and we've said that, because we, whether it is an area of judgment, maybe we kind of stopped at the first level. Now the regulator is saying rightfully that your expectation go to the second level, third level. Right or wrong, that's what the regulator is expecting from us, and I think that's the rule of the game going forward. However, so that's one element. The second element, Menka, which is equally important, and I'm not commenting on the UK regulator, but one of the criticisms of regulators also is the way they define audit failures, and this is a very important fact. In the United States, the restatements that happen to accounts are at a 10-year low right now, 10-year low, which means when you compare the past and how many times companies used to own up and say my accounts were wrong, that's kind of reduced to a 10-year low. But the so-called audit failures are at an all-time high. Because what is happening is the way the audit failure is defined, and one of my colleagues defined this for me to say, let's say I do a 40,000-hour audit, and the regulator finds 3 hours of audit work where they believe a particular control should have been tested in one manner, and we did it in another manner, that's an audit failure for them. And this is becoming a big issue across the world, that people are saying, if regulators say that, look, 50% of audits are failures, but restatements are at a 10-year low, this is not stacking. I think that's another dimension we should bear in mind.
The expectation gap, I think, that Jamil mentions, that is for real. I think what auditors believe they are reporting for and what is an expectation, I think in terms of, I think there is now an expectation to bring out.
So there's only one of two things that can happen. Either you all step up or we step down.
Yeah, I think we should
So what should happen here?
Both, I think
the auditing standards should step up to, because we audit as per auditing standards. And I think to some extent the auditing standards need to step up the kind of procedures that are required. And today we have the tools, we have technology at our disposal to enhance some of the auditing that has been done over the years. So I think there is a possibility for the audit to be stepped up.
Okay. Mr. Mirza, this problem is compounded by the fact, this quality of audit perception problem or reality problem. According to them, perception problem, according to me, reality problem.
No, we didn't say
is compounding.
It's not perception alone. He's also right in...
I haven't said one right thing by Mr. Ramesh today.
No.
He's nodded against everything I've said. No, but this is compounded by a couple of other things. The issue of conflict, which has been discussed now for several years in the audit industry. The fact that audit companies also do consulting and other work, M&A advisory work, a lot more money comes in from there. Audit partners are under pressure to get more clients, to be able to also feed those businesses. I'm not sure how it works, you know better, right? That's one. The issue of concentration, the big four really are, as many people call it, it is an oligopolistic market in some ways. Across the world, in the US and the UK, more than 90% of the listed companies are audited by the big four. In India, more than 60% of the NSE 500 companies are audited by the big four. So let me add all of this, and you tell me where you think the biggest issues lie when it comes to the way the audit business functions, predominantly in India.
Yeah, but first let me disabuse the minds of the viewers, because people, it's easy to beat up what's called the big four. The fact is, the remainder are even worse.
Yeah,
so
but they represent 60%
of I understand. I understand. I understand. But I can say this, they cannot say it. I've sat on boards where we have moved from the other firms, and they were not tiddly-widdly firms, they were all of certain standing, to a big four. And the improvement in the quality of audit is enormous.
Okay.
So whilst indeed they should do even better, and they themselves acknowledge that, I think it's unfair to constantly beat them up. I think that's one thing I can say they cannot. Now, what was your question?
My question was the issue of quality is compounded by issues of conflict. And issues of concentration.
What is the pressure on audit leaders to win more business, just purely in more business, or more business in audit clients? Because that pressure is sometimes the pressure, going back to where we started, that pressure is sometimes the pressure which makes them take on clients they later regret having taken on, and they may resign after 1 year, they may resign after 5 years, whatever. Sure. So what is the mechanism in the firm to reduce that pressure? And I'll share with you, the head of a firm, not the audit head, the head of a firm, one of the big four, once said to me, only half jokingly, I wish we never had an audit practice, because he saw them as an impediment to the progress and the growth of the firm. And that particular thinking, I'm sure, is in all the big four leaders, and the kind of pressure then that brings upon their audit leadership, that look, you people are, as it is, are a pain in the neck for us. We get a lot of bad publicity.
Liability side is
liability, our goodwill is impaired, and we can't win a lot of business because the rule says if you're an auditor, you can't do this, and the other. So there is, if even if financially there is no mechanism any longer by which auditors are being propelled to behave in this particular manner, the fact is you're in one family, and you can still have all these artificial walls, and you can't use the name, so you have an email ID that's different. The reality is you are working in one group.
Another issue that you brought up to me, and I'll ask you to address it very quickly before I open it up to the rest of them, and that is the issue of audit partner remuneration.
Yeah, so this is what I was saying.
This is linked to that.
Yes, that directly or indirectly, does this affect both the remuneration of the audit partner or his audit leading team, or if not the remuneration, how he progresses in the overall firm's hierarchy?
How many clients are you able to bring on board, and therefore
so,
in that process do you end up
a more
bringing
senior position, or you languish doing the same old bunch of audits you have done, or that type of work? And I don't know what the solution to this is.
So let's ask them, are there solutions? Because there are solutions, from regulators, ranging from suggestions of audit-only firms, to do away with the conflict of, let's say, consulting and advisory businesses, no matter how thick or thin the Chinese walls are. There are other types of solutions, break up the big four into smaller companies, because there is a high deal of concentration. What do you think is the real solution to this problem?
No, there are many issues, of course, and there's no single solution. Let me put it this way. I think we're mixing up things in terms of when you're looking at audit partner compensation and you're mixing up audit quality. The fact of the matter is an auditor today is faced with is the only one perhaps being scrutinized amongst the functions in a firm. He's always under a spotlight. He's inspected by regulators, there are internal inspections. You are all the time inspecting and asking questions, saying we haven't enough information. And at the same time, management or the user does not perceive value from an audit as opposed to value from other functions. If I'm handling your tax and I save X dollars or X rupees, you would be more than willing to pay me a percentage of that. Because you're able to perceive value.
So it is linked to quality. It is linked to quality. No, it's not linked
to quality, it's a link to value. So the auditor's quality, and Sudhir and Jamil will bear with me, has actually gone up. Okay. Because of the correction in the ecosystem, the ecosystem where there is governance, audit committees judge the auditor, and the audit committees change the auditors if they're not satisfied with audit performance. They evaluate. Regulators inspect. There are other inspections in India, the Quality Review Board, the Peer Review Board. There are others who come in and actually inspect your files.
There's still no NFRA. So actually a lot of the data that I cite to you from other jurisdictions, I don't even have comparable data here in India.
Of independent inspection.
Correct.
But the fact is, even these inspections, the person is subject to. He is the only one in the firm subject to all of it. So is there any opportunity for him to cut corners and reduce quality? The answer is no. The challenge on him is he's part of a firm where other functions perhaps may be able to charge more than what he can charge, and maybe may in some situations be profitable. It's all debatable. It's at different points in time. Some would say consulting is profitable. There are points in time where consulting is not profitable in audit. The auditor perhaps may benefit from some of those. It's not just the monetary.
The point being?
I'll come into, therefore I'm coming to it. So the point I'm trying to make here is the inherent nature of a multidisciplinary practice is absolutely critical for audit quality, because the support he draws upon the other functions in a firm. So leading to an audit-only firm, where will he go for tax advice? Where will he go for technology support? Today, the auditor, unfortunately, because of the way the environment has changed, has to be tech-savvy. He's not in the business of technology.
So you're saying this helps quality, doesn't take away from quality?
It forces you to, that is one part of it. Now to deal with concentration. An audit profession should mirror the constituency it serves, right? If in the constituency it serves you have let's say 4 large industries, you have medium, there are small, the audit firm should be of commensurate size. You can't have a mom and pop store being given the opportunity to serve the largest country in the network. Look at where we are in the profession today in India. We have around 300,000 professionals. Half of them are in practice. Of the half, 150,000 approximately, 50,000 are sole practitioners, sole proprietors. And thousands of them are partnership firms with a few partners and few tens of people.
So they are not equipped to deal with the large companies.
That there you say concentration.
Okay.
So the constituency, if he is in the audit committee of a company of size, much as he would like to give out work to the others, he's unable to, because the issue of choice.
So you're saying multidisciplinary adds to quality, and concentration doesn't make you take your clients for granted or your stakeholders for granted.
There's a different
Therefore,
issue of
both
concentration.
of these do not
There's a different
impact
issue of concentration.
Quality of audit.
Is an issue of choice for an audit committee, and too few. If one fails, there's an even larger issue.
Yeah.
3 points. First, I agree with what Ramesh said. One is, I think there are enough checks and balances on conflicts now, because, and I can tell you from practical experience, the amount of pressure on audit partners to sell non-audit work on audit clients, frankly, is no longer the way it used to be a few years ago. 2-3 reasons for that.
It's still there a little.
Yeah, it will be. But
Thank you for saying it. I was going to butt in, but I stood
But 2-3 points. One is the prohibition on certain non-audit services. I think it's working in practice. Many audit committees are saying you're not going to do this. Second, the approval process by the audit committees, I don't think we should underestimate that. We know of many audit committees that have said that the company has multiple choices outside, so why do they need to take certain service from the auditor? It's working in practice, Menka. So I think, one, I do not believe as an audit leader today I feel uncomfortable, and that's really the part in the conflict. The second part really is on the multidisciplinary firm. I completely agree. Out of the audit work we do today, accounting knowledge and auditing knowledge is perhaps 60% of that knowledge. Tax knowledge, information technology knowledge. If you look at IT systems and you don't understand that, you're not going to be able to audit. Valuation.
So how do audit firms that are standalone audit firms survive?
So therefore, that is the question.
So you're saying their quality sucks because they don't have all the support service.
There is a problem. There is a problem.
You've turned the entire argument of this on its head.
It's the reality. Let's say I'm going to do a bank and I'm a small auditor.
Not possible.
Banking transactions happen on mobiles, happen remotely, high technology.
I think that's a big point.
Yeah. I need to be enabled. So we need consolidation of firms. We need more larger firms.
That's a big point.
No, nobody disagrees that. We need more larger firms.
Where is the issue?
I think the Prime Minister himself has said that, right, a few years ago.
Our regulations are archaic. You can't share profits with a non-CA. Now, he's a technology specialist.
Yeah.
Okay.
I need him.
And
how can I not?
I was talking about concentration only from the point of view that does it make the Big Four sort of take things for granted and therefore, in some sense, take the pressure of audit quality.
So, Menka,
that was the limited point I wanted to make.
Despite the fact that there are few firms, right, few large firms, the amount of competition we saw, even when audit rotation came in, was immense.
Okay.
Immense.
Point well taken.
And I just want to make the third point on what we should do, okay, on the other firms to step up, because I genuinely believe we are missing a trick here. One is, I think we should get away with this, archaic law on not having multidisciplinary firms. So we should get, allow every firm to have a combination. Second, I think many of the smaller firms have associated themselves with international names. Today, they are not allowed to use those names. I think we should allow that because that will give a lot of comfort.
But you'll forgive me if I sidestep that because I'm not talking as much of an industry issue as I'm talking about an audit quality issue. I want to come back to you, Sudhir, with that very last question and last comment in this debate, which is that, is there a problem with quality of audit today in India, according to you? Very honestly and candidly, I'm asking you. Your comments will close this debate. And if there is, what is the fix?
Yeah, I think I believe that the quality of audits is in accordance with the auditing standards.
That's the cop-out of an answer. Is there a problem with the quality of audits in India today?
Yeah, I think there is an expectation gap. I would say that yes, you can step up the quality of audit. There is no doubt about that to meet the expectations of. I think this is we have to acknowledge that there is an issue across the world. People are looking. It's not just about India. So when you ask me about India specifically, I don't think is any different than the rest of the world. I think around the world today, audit is under focus. People are looking at what the standards should be, how accountable auditors should be. The topics you raised around conflict of interest, I think these are live topics across the world, and I don't think India is an exception to that conversation. That's what I think.
I'm afraid you didn't answer my question, Sudhir, but I'll leave it there because in interest of time. And this was not to put you all on the spot. At the end of the day, you all are gatekeepers. We trust accounts because they come through you. And the day that trust gets broken, I think a fundamental issue in the capital markets, will be there. So thank you all of you for joining us today. Thank you very much, Mr. Mirza, for playing the counter. And thank you very much for watching.